Sydney James Haylock Jim Poulter. Obituary. July 5, 1941 to October 16, 2025. Jim was many things to many people. He was first and foremost a beloved husband to Barbara, a much-loved father to Joanne, Cameron, Samantha and Rick, a loved and respected father-in-law to Gordon, Ian and Liz, and grandfather to Jessica and her partner Rupert, and a doting great-grandfather to August, and a dear friend to many. Jim was born on July 5, 1941 in Ivanhoe to Hazel and Alf Poulter. He came from a pioneering family. The Poulters had been in Greensboro since the 1840s, working the orchards and helping to shape the local community. You'll still see their name today in Poulter Avenue and Poulter Reserve, a lasting reminder of their deep roots to the area. Hazel's side of the family, Shivers, was also well known locally, with many streets in Templestowe named after her extended family, also dating back to the 1800s. Jim grew up with his older sister Genevieve, and by all accounts had a happy childhood, though, like many families of that era, it wasn't without its challenges. His father Alf served during the war, working with the Catalina flying boats, amphibious aircraft, while his mother Hazel kept the family going at home. Jim was a bright and curious boy who loved to learn, though he occasionally got himself into a bit of trouble. He attended East Ivanhoe Primary School, where he met Mal Corbin, who became a lifelong mate and fellow Fitzroy supporter, and then went on to Scotch College, where he formed friendships that would last a lifetime. He was fit, strong, and more than a little competitive, known to get into the occasional scuffle, usually because he was standing up for someone who needed defending. That protective streak never left him. Jim's story could never be told without Barbara, his partner in every sense of the word. It was 1959 and Barb was just 16 when she went along to a trad jazz dance at the Glen Iris RSL. That's where she met a young man named Jim Poulter, and as Barb herself once said, that night changed everything. They married a few years later on December 8, 1962, at the Scotch College Chapel. Barb, just 19, and Jim, 21, full of hope and ready to build a life together. Their honeymoon was spent in Rosebud, and before long they settled into their first home in Templestowe, proudly built by Barb's father Albert. After 20 years there, Albert built them another in Serples Road, where they would remain for the next 40 years. When it became clear that biological children weren't possible, they never hesitated. They knew they were meant to be parents. Their first little girl, Jo, came home when she was just 2 years and 4 months old. Then came Cam, Sam and Rick, each one welcomed with open arms and endless love. They made a warm, busy, happy home full of laughter, activity, and the occasional chaos that comes with 4 kids. In those early years, Barb worked as a medical receptionist, while Jim began in the public service. It was Barb who encouraged him to study further, to push himself, and he did. He went back to school, completed his qualifications, and moved into what became a lifelong career in social work. He began at Turana in 1964, later working in child protection, family violence, Indigenous affairs, and forensic care, often pioneering new approaches long before they became standard practice. He was known for his strong moral compass, for challenging the system when it wasn't working, and for always standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Even after retiring, he didn't stop. He taught at Monash University and U3A, where he was deeply respected and much loved. He completed his doctorate in social work at 60, something which he always credited Barb with inspiring him to do. Alongside his professional life, Jim had an incredible gift for writing. He was a prolific author, publishing more than 20 books, many of them exploring Australian history, Indigenous culture, and local stories. His memoir, Little Bloody Jimmy, and all his other works were self-published, and in true Jim style, he did everything himself, right down to the marketing. He'd take his books to the markets to sell, sometimes offering a discount, buy 2, get a free plastic bag, and he was proud that every one of his books was archived in the State Library of Victoria. He also wrote for the Warrandyte Diary, contributing insightful pieces about Indigenous history in the local area, and long before that had written community newsletters with Barb, which the kids would help fold and deliver around the neighbourhood. He reached countless people through his words. Outside of work and writing, Jim's other great love was sport, especially athletics and pole vaulting. He had been a fit young man, and he stayed that way all his life. He played football for Templestowe, barracked passionately for Fitzroy, and when they moved north, he followed them to Brisbane. He even attended this year's grand final and watched the replay half a dozen times. He loved athletics, hurdles, decathlon, discus, and of course, pole vaulting. He did a decathlon on his 60th birthday in Darwin and was still competing into his 80s. In fact, he was rated the #1 pole vaulter in the world for his age group, though it should be pointed out that there were only 2 competitors. Still, he was jumping 2.20 metres well into his 80s, a remarkable feat of strength and spirit. Jim was a loving, caring and kind man, generous with his time, and the sort who would drop everything if someone needed a hand. He was strong, determined, and sometimes a bit of a bull at a gate, but that was Jim. Always doing, constantly busy, always finding something to fix or improve. He liked to call himself a bush carpenter, a bit of a jerry-built fella, and while his handiwork might not have been the straightest or sturdiest, it always came from the right place. If something needed fixing, he'd give it a go. Jim had a big heart and an everlasting love for his family. He was a teacher in every sense of the word. He was a man of action rather than a man of planning, preferring to dive right in rather than stand back and think about it for too long. He was a quiet campaigner for improvement, sharing thoughtful letters and emails and offering his advice or perspective on the things that mattered to him. Jim was many things: a husband, father, grandfather, teacher, athlete, writer, thinker, and friend. He had a deep sense of fairness, a deep sense of right or wrong, and a generosity that showed in quiet ways, helping others, standing up for what was right, and always protecting the people he loved. He lived a good life, an interesting life, and a life that left a mark on his family, on his community, and on the countless people he helped along the way. Statement from Manningham Mayor. We are deeply saddened by the passing of Jim Poulter, a beloved local historian, educator, and tireless contributor to our community. Jim served as a councillor of the city of Doncaster and Templestowe in the 1980s. He was a passionate advocate for truth-telling about our First Peoples, sharing knowledge through his Aboriginal Studies classes and Birrarung Stories column. In 2018, Jim became the second person to receive the keys to the city for his contribution to Reconciliation Manningham, and as a member of the Manningham University of the Third Age, U3A. A dedicated athlete, Jim trained at Doncaster Athletics track into his 80s, holding a club record in pole vault. We thank Jim for his wisdom, generosity, and the lasting impact he had on our community. We extend our heartfelt condolences to his family, friends, students, and all those touched by his work. Deirdre Diamante, Manningham Mayor 2024 to 2025. This article was read by Rebecca Rose.